What's up guys, ATCZ here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we're doing an update on Evil Twins, a deck that with every set that comes by we're getting more and more support. Now with Lightning Overdrive we did get one more card for the deck and we're waiting for Dawn of Majesty for this deck to be complete. So before that I just want to show you how the deck is most probably going to be played as a budget version, of course, until Dawn of Majesty is out, because I know there's a version with Eldritch out there, but I know that a lot of people can't afford these cards, so I decided to make the most budget version possible. So yeah, before we begin, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So starting off with the Live Twins, we're playing 3 copies of Live Twin Kill and 3 copies of Live Twin Lila. So these are your starters. You want to see one of them in your hand or a way to get one of them to your hand so you can start your plays. One gets another monster out of your deck. If you summon Kill, you summon a Lila monster. If you summon Lila, you summon a Kill monster. And now you don't even have to get the other counterpart out of the deck, because there are 2 more monsters that you play that you can get them outside of your deck with these effects. So these cards give you the starting point. They also can act as extenders because the card that special summons them from the deck. So if your opponent maybe gammas the first one, then you can use the spell card that gets the other one out of your deck to get the other one's effect, because each one is once per turn. But if you don't get the other one and you have no other monsters on the field because maybe a gamma cleared your field, then you can use the other one's effect and you can go from there. So the utility with these cards is really good. They're starters, they're extenders, the deck can do so much. What the deck really lacks is kind of a power play that can push for game very easily. It kind of reminds me of Sky Striker without the unfair part that a Sky Striker had with Engage, but this card is basically the same. It's a link spam deck that has a lot of weak monsters but tries to accumulate as much advantage as possible, as quickly as possible, while also disrupting your opponent, so you need these cards to max them out, of course. The next cards, I'm playing them as one-offs, and these 2 cards are much better after Dawn of Majesty. Right now, these cards are not the best, so we have 1 copy of Live Twin Lila Treat and 1 copy of Live Twin Kill Frost. So these 2 cards act like an extender for the deck. The problem is that they're not Cyberse monsters, so it's not like you can search them now with Signet Mining. So it's a good thing that Konami gave us a new card that's going to come out in Dawn of Majesty that searches a Live Twin monster out of the deck. So this card will act not only as 3 extra copies of a new starter for get Live Twins if you don't have any Live Twin in your hand, but let's say your opponent Ash Blossoms imperms one of your monsters. Instead of having to go for the spell that you have now as an extender in order to go for the play that completely locks you into Evil Twins for the rest of the turn, by getting into that continuous spell and searching the appropriate name, because both of these cards can be special summoned if you have the other counterpart on the field. If you control a Kill or a Lila monster, you can special summon them from the hand, depending on which one you have. So these cards are good one-offs that you don't really want to see them in your hand, because they're specific extenders. It's not like you can get them on the field, whatever you have on the field, because if you draw a Lila with Lila Trait, then that's bad, because you won't be able to get Lila Trait on the field if your Lila got negated, because you need a Kill on the field to do that. Same thing with Kill and reverse. So these cards are good one-offs, but right now the main purpose of these cards is getting them out of your deck with the effects of your Live Twin monsters on the field. Post Dawn of Majesty, these 2 cards, you are not going to play more copies of them, but they're going to be searchable with 6 cards, because it's not only the new continuous card that we're going to get, it's also Secret Password that searches that continuous spell that can search these 2 cards. So it's 6 more copies of these 2, so you can get so much value out of being able to play around hand traps, because one way of playing around your opponent's disruption is also a way of getting advantage, because you don't care if you get hand trapped and your opponent loses cards while your combo still goes intact. So this is another way that this deck can get advantage. So these 2 cards are really good, and they do have a grave effect. Lila Trait's grave effect is very relevant, but Kill Frost effect is kind of like a shared right once. So when your opponent adds a card, you banish her and you draw a card, but sometimes you don't really want to use this effect because there is another application for this card. It's a level 2 Aqua monster, so you can probably see where this is going. So before you banish this right away, the first chance you get to, just think that if you bring this back during your opponent's turn with your Evil Twin Lila, and then you're not locked into Fiends anymore because you did this during your opponent's turn, you can go into a totally awesome, because I do play a Paleo engine in this deck. This is why I replaced the Eldritch engine with to make the deck more budget. So being able to go into totally is also another option for the deck that gives you more power on the field and also more interruption. Now the last monster to the deck is 3 copies of Parallax. So if you don't use the spell card, or if you don't use the spell card right away, then you can go into a Parallax, and Parallax has 2 options. First of all, of course, you can go into rank 4 because it's whatever people do with Parallax, but also you can go into more cards, because with Parallax, if you go into a Link Disciple and a Link Devotee, not only can you fix your hand a little bit, but you can also get Masquerena on the field, and Masquerena is really good because there is a monster you can summon with Masquerena Masquerena even if you get locked with the Evil Twins effect during your opponent's turn while you're trying to disrupt them, but you can still summon either a Nightmare Unicorn, which is a fiend, or you can go into the big boys, which is either summoning Unchained Abomination, which gets a lot of value in this deck because this deck's main disruption is popping cards out of your opponent's field, or you can go into an Underworld Goddess of the Closed World, which is the Link 5. So all three of these options I just mentioned are fiend monsters, so you can summon them fair game even if you have used your Evil Twins effect. So this is why Masquerena gives a lot of value in this deck, and this is why sometimes instead of just blindly going into a rank 4 when you use Parallax Seed, or maybe if you have enough extenders in your hand, going for the Link Disciple, Link Devotee combo to get to tokens can actually be much more beneficial. For the spells, play 3 copies of Secret Passphrase. So Password is a card that can do 2 things. It can search you an extender or a starter, which is the same thing because your starters are extended as well in the deck, or it can search you disruption. So you want to try to keep this card for last. Try to bait your opponent's disruption, if any, with your Live Twin monsters, and if your combo goes uninterrupted to the end, then you can search the 1 copy of the trap I'm going to show you a little later for this card, so you can have even more interruption. Of course, Persona of Majesty, this card is going to be even more insane because it's going to be able to add an extender that doesn't lock you into Evil Twin, so you can go into Masquerena or Baguska as well, or maybe even Totally Awesome. So yeah, we're just waiting for 1 new card and this deck is going to be complete, and I think after this deck is going to actually be a decent rogue contender, if not better, because in combination with Eldritch, the deck can do so much and has a lot of utility that it's going to at least give it a good chance of beating the top meta decks. We have 3 copies of Live Twin Home. This is the extender of the deck, and a lot of people play like 1 copy of this card, maybe 2, but I like maxing it out, especially now because we don't have that many extenders. Along with 3 copies of Secret Password, we have 6 extenders that if your Live Twin monster gets stopped, unless you have gotten lucky and you have actually drawn the counterpart from Treat and Frost in your hand that you can special summon, which is not going to happen too often because I still think it's not worth trying to main deck more copies of these 2 monsters just for this lucky scenario happening. I think main decking 3 copies of Password and 3 copies of Home makes it consistent enough to the point that you can get to an extender even if your play gets stopped. But the problem with this card is that it completely locks you into Evil Twins from the extra deck. But still, it's a good card. I think even if you get locked into Evil Twins, just doing the standard combo is a decent enough play. I also play another card in the deck that helps you get the most value out of your Evil Twins during your opponent's turn, because when you use the Evil Twins during your opponent's turn, when you special summon one with the other, you get both of them on the field. So unless your opponent destroys one of them and the one that hasn't used its effect yet, then you won't be able to get the other one back from the grave, but there's a way to play around that. I'm also playing 3 copies of Cyanide Mining. This is to replace the continuous spell I've talked about that's going to come out in Dawn of Majesty. I think this card actually sucks, to be honest, but it's something that I need to play because I value consistency over anything else, so I'd much rather discard a card to guarantee that I have a play, and I also play a trap card that needs to discard a card, so if I don't need to use Cyanide Mining, it's a free fodder to discard. So it's actually not that bad, it's just that I've tested the deck with the new support too, so this is why this card feels a lot weak right now. But for now, if you want to play the deck, you have to play Cyanide Mining in my opinion. Otherwise, I think you are increasing your chances of breaking by a lot. Now, you do play a lot of traps in the deck, so the deck is very control-ish, but it can actually go for pushes. So the trap lineup is here kind of to do the same thing that Eldritch does. The Eldritch trap lineup and the Eldritch engine in general is not only disruption, but it also gives you bodies on the field that you can push with because the deck, like I said, is inherently weak. So this is why I tried to do the same thing with a more budget option, and of course this is by choosing the Paleo traps. But first I'm going to show you the 2 Evil Twin traps that you play. So you play 1 copy of Evil Twin Present and 1 copy of Evil Twin Challenge. So the reason these 2 are here both as one-ups is because they're both searchable through Secret Password, and your Present is a disruption, so it basically a switcheroo. So when you have both a Lila and a Kisikil monster on the field, you give one of them to your opponent, then you steal one of your opponent's monster, and that effect is permanent, by the way. So this is one way you can get rid of the one monster that you haven't used its effect from the field, so you can use the other one to be able to either draw a card or pop a card. So this is one way to do that, but most of the time you'll find yourself actually using Password to search an extender instead, because it's very unlikely that your combo is going to go on completely uninterrupted. So this is why you only need to play 1 copy of these cards, because maybe if your opponent, because these cards rely on the combo to go off. And also Challenge is here just to give you some searchable recovery, because the deck, if it runs out of monsters, or if it's stuck with a single monster on the field that you don't really want to, then you won't be able to go for the full combo because you won't be able to use the effects from the grave. So this is why being able to revive one of the Link monsters with this card is also really good. It also has an effect that it says that you can Link summon an Evil Twin Link monster after using the revival effect. It doesn't come up too often because usually you're bringing back a Link monster anyway with with this card, but still it's a decent searchable, so I think these two cards are good one-offs in the deck just because you can search them with password. Now, the rest of the traps are here because, like I said, you need certain kinds of utility with a deck. The first thing you need to do is get more bodies on the field, so let's go to the Paleo traps. We have 3 copies of Paleozoic Dinomischus, which of course is by far the best Paleozoic trap. Everyone plays that if they're playing any kind of engine like that. 3 copies of Canadia. Canadia has become much better recently because decks like Dragon Link, if you get their monster as a Book of Moon, then there's nothing they can do with that monster, because if it goes to the grave, it has a lot of utility for either the Chaos Dragons or for cards like Word like a Cigar Dragon that can revive them. So getting it stuck on the field face down is actually the best thing you can do if you want to counter this deck. So that's why I think Canadia is such a good card. Even going second when your opponent tries to play around the stuff that you have brought on the field, or if you're trying to play around their established board, being able to use cards like this to bait negates is really important, because your opponent is going to waste a negate, maybe like a Savage or something like that, card like this, because if they don't, they're going to lose their counters and the card's completely useless. 3 copies of Olenoides. I was debating this over Morella, but I felt like getting a spell and trap removal for the deck is actually good, because usually you want to be using the pop effects from your Evil Twins to counter your opponent's monsters, unless they're playing a complete backdoor deck like Subterror or Altergeist. But still, something like this can be really good against combo too, because there are cards like Dragon Ravine, there are cards like Word like a Cigar Dragon, there is the Prankite's Continuous spell that's an extender for the deck. They play every deck that, even in combo decks, they do play some sort of backrow that you want to hit. So playing something like Olenoides is actually not that bad, and it also gives you another monster you can summon back from the grave, so you can go into your rank 2s. Now, the next card, I want people to actually think about this card, how great it is for a deck like this. So I'm playing 3 copies of Ballista Squad. So when I was testing the deck, I felt like the problem I had was like, I was usually ending with a Kissekil on the field and a Lila in the grave. So I was bringing back Lila with Kissekil, I was popping a card. Up to that point, it was great. But after that, unless my opponent dealt with Kissekil, I would not be able to use Lila's effect to bring back Kissekil to draw another card. And if my opponent knows what they're doing, they're not going to destroy the one that has used the effect, it's going to destroy the one that has not used the effect, because both monsters are very vulnerable, they're just 1100 attack beaters. So being able to tribute the one that you used its effect with Ballista Squad, pop another card with Ballista Squad, and then use the one you brought back to get the other one back from the grave, the one you tributed, to also get the other one's effect, gives you a cycle that gives you so much advantage. You can pop 2 cards with this combo and draw 1 card, because if you didn't have Ballista Squad, you would only be drawing 1 or you would be popping 1. So this card kind of makes you make full use out of the value that these cards offer, while also getting more disruption. Let's having a cake and eating it, because if you don't play something like this, you rely on your opponent making a mistake of popping the one that has already used its effect, so you can use the other one, which is, let's be honest, it's not going to happen too often unless your opponent doesn't read the cards at all. So this is why I think playing a card like this can actually give you so much advantage. 3 copies of Trap Trick, of course, getting your Ballista Squad or any of your Paleo traps, and 3 copies of Solemn Strike. This is much better main deck Solemn than Judgment, because if you're trying to counter cards like Lightning Storm or Really Match, usually they're not in the main deck, they're usually in the side deck. So when you're going second, games 2 and 3, you don't need to play something like that. Or when you're going first, games 2 and 3, you can side Judgment if you're afraid of something like this. But Strike is a much better card because it's much better going second. When you're trying to break boards, this deck doesn't have much going for it, because it's not like Striker, it doesn't have spells that destroy your opponent's board like Anchor and Afterburners. You need to set your traps and hope for the best, because if you try to combo under a board, you're most likely going to waste your resources. So it's best to just hope that cards like Ballista Squad, Dinomischus, Canadia, and Strike can deal with your opponent's board, and then you can go into doing your combo during the next turn. Now for the extra deck, we play 3 copies of Evil Twin Kissekil and 3 copies of Evil Twin Lila. You need to max them out. You go into the grind game with this deck most of the time, especially if you're not playing Eldritch, which you will always can get a 3500 monster on the field, so you can finish games faster. With this version, sometimes your hands will be a little bit weird, so you won't be able to get enough damage on the field, so you need to grind it out, so you need to max out both of these. So these cards, when you don't have the other counterpart on the field, you can special summon Lila or Kissekil monster depending on what you have on the grave. So you either get the Link monsters back, so you can use the effect with Lila's effect to pop a card, or Kissekil's effect to draw a card, or you can do the play I said before, so you can bring back Frost during your opponent's end phase, so you can go into totally during the next turn. So this is why I mentioned if you find the opportunity to use Frost's effect right away, just think about what you can do with her being in the grave and what you can do without her being in the grave, because if your answer is that you can summon totally next turn because you do have enough Paleo traps either on the field or in the grave, then just think twice before banishing Frost just for a draw. We're playing one copy of Link Disciple, one copy of Link Devotee. I really like this combo because sometimes I do play a lot of cards that actually contribute to the consistency of the deck, but also to the breaking of the deck, because when you play too many consistency cards, yes, you won't break, but once you've done your combo, the rest of the cards that would actually be extenders, they don't really serve a purpose. So being able to draw a card and return one back with Devotee's effect is actually really important because it helps you dig for more disruption, and also the 2 tokens give you go into the 1 copy of Masquerena we have right here, and ending on Masquerena and the Kill on the field is usually what you're going to end on, unless you've also drawn Parallax Seed. So you can bring back your Lila with your Kill, then maybe if you have a Ballista squad, you can do the same thing, and by using Masquerena's effect, you can go into either an Unchained Abomination, which will combo with Lila to pop more than 1 cards, or you can go into Unicorn if you have a lot of cards in your hand that you don't really care about, or Underworld Goddess if there is a monster that you really need to get rid of and you can't target it because maybe like it's a Dragoon or something like that. This is the value of Masquerena. It gives you options that other cards do not, because it's a disruption that gives you 3 different options from your extra deck, and since they're all fiends, it fits perfectly with the theme of the deck because you don't get locked into anything other than fiends. 1 copy of Unicorn, of course, 1 copy of Unchained Abomination. Abomination is such a great card because all the deck does is pop cards, so being able to double down the pops with your Unchained Abomination gives you so much value. The deck loses to cards that pressure you very, very quickly, because decks like Dragonling, while they can put up a lot of pressure, they do need the cards to stay a little bit on the field before they link them away. So being able to pop them is actually really huge. I think the deck's biggest weakness is probably Prankids, because if you pop this normal summon, if they have an extender like a fusion spell or something like that to go, then you're going to struggle because they're going to get a lot of monsters on the field at once. Dragonling does not get a lot of monsters on the field at once. Each monster is summoned 1 at a time in order to go into stuff like Romulus, LP, and Pisty. So if you pop those monsters 1 at a time, then there's absolutely no way that they're going to be able to combo unless you only have 1 pop. Then yes, that's not going to be enough to stop a card like Dragonling, but still being able to double those pops is very important because usually Romulus is what they're trying to do first after going to strike your dragon, so they need to get 2 monsters on the field to do that. And 1 copy of Underworld Goddess. This card is much better in this deck than any other deck just because she's a fiend. You'll be able to combo Masquerena, but I've started playing this card in any deck that has the space to do so because she's an physical out to things that decks do not have an out for. You can out Dragoon with it, you can out Ultimate Falcon-like cards with it, because some decks don't have an out to this. If you can't play access code, or if you don't have access to access code, then you need something to be able to deal with those cards. So this is why this card is so great, and it's also a monster that's very hard to deal with because she's only affected by cards that target her, and targeting has also been considered like the worst kind of effect, so people try to make use more of cards that don't target, but these do not work with this card, and she's also a disruption that negates card effects that special summon from the grave. Now for the Xyz monsters, play 1 copy of Totally. You don't really need to play more than 1. Usually when you go through 1, you're going to win, and sometimes I find myself not even summoning Totally by summoning the 1 copy of Opabinia instead, because Opabinia gives you kind of a removal during your opponent's turn and during your own turn as well, because if you're waiting for the traps to set them, then you can't really interact with your opponent during your own turn. But with Opabinia, you can search and activate Deinonymiscus and Canadia from your hand, so you can actually try to break your opponent's board during your turn, which is something that the deck really doesn't have. So this card gives you an option that makes the deck a little bit better than one it should be. And 1 copy of Baguska. This is the only rank 4 I play for Parallax Seed. You can play cards like Dweller, you can play cards like Tornado Dragon, but the reason I opt for Baguska is because it's a card you can summon mid-combo, and it doesn't affect your combo whatsoever, because all the monsters that you're trying to summon are link monsters. You're going to summon Baguska after you've used your Live Twins effect, so it doesn't stop anything like that. So you can summon it, and then your combo doesn't change at all, and Baguska is a card that if it doesn't affect you, then it affects only your opponent, then it has really good value, because Dweller, yes, it's really great against certain matchups, and Tornado Dragon is really great against other matchups, but Baguska usually covers both of those matchups in a decent way. So this is why I think if you don't have enough space to play both Tornado and Dweller, or maybe Baguska at all, then I think just playing Baguska is the way to go. So yep, that's the deck, guys. Evil Twin, I think it's a really cool deck. I think that Konami has done a really great job in keeping this deck balanced while also keeping it good enough and having the options it needs in order to be able to be playable. And I'm so happy that we're getting this card we're getting in Dawn of Majesty, because this is exactly what the deck was missing. So now the deck is going to have the consistency it needs, but also getting enough power to be able to combat the meta. And I'm really happy to see, and I'm really excited to see how this is going to go down the road. So yep, that's it guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos, and we'll see you next time.